Enjoy watching Josh do some song leading. He's a happy guy when he sings. I've heard it said, I think I made this joke last week, so one of you in here already knows this, but I've heard it said that there's bass, tenor, alto, and soprano, and joyful noise. But Josh is, what, tenor? I don't know. He's not joyful noise. You actually can carry a tune. Appreciate that. The summer of 2009, I was in between my sophomore and junior years of college and was pursuing my degree in criminal justice to eventually join a police force, which I eventually did. But it was during that summer that one of my instructors recommended that I take an ROTC military kind of catch-up course just to I guess, I don't know, heighten leadership skills, decision-making, that sort of thing. And he's like, you know what, the military is going to be great for you. So he's like, why don't you go do that? We'll pay you. And I mean, he just made it sound great. And I was like, I've got nothing better to do. I'll go do this training program. You're going to pay me. I'll go get to have fun. Right? Oh boy, it was, he sugarcoated it in every way. So I was a little bit behind the curve. So I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky for this training course. And what they do at this program is, you know what they, like when a private enlists, they have like a 13-week basic training course. They squeezed all of that into 4 weeks from my class because you had missed your freshman and sophomore year of ROTC, so they're going to try to catch you up quick, fast, and in a hurry. So I was a little bit behind the curve, and a lot of my compatriots down there, they had already, their programs had worked with them a little bit. They were actually already kind of in line to join the ROTC. I never really had it in my mind to join the military, but it was you can still go and get this experience on the military's dime. So I said, all right, sure, I'll go do that. And man, it was like what you see on the Discovery Channel or the military channel when like you pull up in the van or the buses and those drill sergeants get on that bus and just start yelling at you. And you're running out there and they pour all your stuff on the concrete and just make you feel dumb, and they're giving you push-ups for everything. I mean, I was like, this is a little bit more intense than what I thought I was signing up for. My recruiter lied to me. And I just I was laying there in my bunk that night, not knowing anything about the military, and I'm in this barracks. I'm just wide-eyed. I'm like, okay, they're not going to kick me out if I try really hard, right? Like, it's not like the Navy SEALs where they're trying to get you to quit. I mean, the Navy SEALs is like, they're trying to break your soul, like crack the fragment of your DNA, This program still wanted graduates, so as long as you're still breathing at the end of it, you might get a commission. And so I was like, okay, I'm at least going to keep breathing by the end of this program, and so I set it in my mind, okay, it's 4 weeks, and I can do this. And I was assigned to squad number 2, so we're all broken up into these sections in the barracks, and my bunkmate, I would just call him Mr. Soldier. His name was Tom, and he was the kind of guy, he was smart, athletic, and he was just like built for the military. He had done nothing but think about the military his whole life. And so this guy came into this program like, I'm going to make it. And everybody that looked at this guy were like, you're going to make it. If anybody here can do it, you can do it. And so the training begins, right? And 4 days before graduation, I am called into our squad lieutenant's office for whatever, I don't know what's going on, and I get in there, and there's Tom sitting on a chair, and she explains the situation that I just needed to be there because she was a female lieutenant and he was a male, cadet, and I was just kind of there to listen and maybe help if I could because he and I knew each other. Tom wanted to go home. We're 4 days away from graduating, and he missed his mama, basically. We were 4 days away, and he said, I just don't want to get up at 3:30 in the morning 4 or 5 more times. I'm just done, and I don't have to be here, so I don't want to be here. And I'm like, man, I'm not even built for this, right? You're Mr. Soldier. You can do it. Come on, Tom, you can do it. And he said, no, I just don't want to. I'm done. I don't, it's too early, and, Now, he didn't really have a very good explanation for it. He just didn't want to go through the next 4 days of, we're kind of winding down, but they're still cramming 13 weeks of basic training into those days. So he just said, I've made it this far and I don't have anything to prove. So he was out. So we graduated without Tom. And I tell you that because, boy, if that doesn't have application to our Christian walk, I don't know what does. Right? Our commitment to Christ has to run so deep in this life because there are so many trials and problems and stressors and hurts, and without total commitment, being all in, we could just end up walking away. Even if we're the kind of person that everybody looks at and thinks, oh, they're going to make it, sometimes people like that leave the church. But I'll tell you, if you follow that thinking down the line, if you're that person that's thinking, maybe I would give up my faith for X, Y, or Z, if you follow that far enough and you think about the consequences or the rewards long enough, you'll realize that commitment to Christ is not an option. When you really get down to the end of the road, I'm not even going to click this. Next slide, please. Our commitment is not an option because I'm just going to give you a few things about my thoughts on commitment this morning that I see in Scripture that I think will help us with this idea. So we know nobody in here is Mr. Christian or Mrs. Christian that's going to walk away 4 days before it's over, right? So number one, consider this about commitment. You will fail, next slide, if you give yourself the option, okay? And the Lord never really gives us the option. It's kind of like in Luke chapter 9, verse 62, it's the over-eager disciple in Luke 9:62. Next slide, please. I'll keep trying to pick it now that we got it warmed up. There it is. All right. You saw the next one. I'll just leave that there for you. In Luke 9:62, that's the disciple that said, Lord, I'll follow you. Right? I want to follow you. I'm committed. And Jesus kind of sees this guy, and he looks at him, and he says, no one, after putting his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. God doesn't ever really give the less than full commitment option to his people. And Jesus was, obviously, God in the flesh, and he was no different in the way that he spoke about it. And so there's this farming terminology of putting your hand to the plow and working. That's kind of like a metaphor for the Christian walk. You can't be looking over your shoulder. If you're looking over your shoulder while you're trying to do a straight line, you're going to veer off left or right. You're going to, plow the field and look back, and it's going to be a bunch of zigzags. Jesus says, I want some straight rows here. But there's another plow, interestingly enough, in the Old Testament in 1 Kings 19 that I want us to look at. If you would flip over to that one and read these verses with me. Now, this is kind of the transition period between Elijah and Elisha. Okay. Now, Elijah has just done the whole prophets of Baal squared off, on Mount Carmel, and Jezebel kind of has him on the run, right? He's scared, and he's a little unsure of himself, but the Lord strengthens him. Says take a nap, eat some food, right? Who doesn't need that sometimes? So Elijah does that, and then God says, you know what? You might need some help. About that time you're going to transition. Go find Elisha. So in 1 Kings 19, verse 19, he departs there, and it says that he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, while he was plowing with 12 pairs of oxen before him. And he with the 12th, and Elijah passed over to him and threw his mantle on him. So he finds Elisha plowing. So he's, what you can envision here is there's 12 guys plowing with 24 oxen, okay? And they're all kind of going in that row, plowing the field all at once. And Elisha was part of that. And we read later that he owned this field. That was his family's business, okay? And Elijah throws his mantle on Elisha while he's doing this. Now, to us, that's might not necessarily register what to do if that happens to us today. That's kind of a their culture thing. But what that meant was, so the mantle was this big piece of cloth, like a big cloak, okay? And he puts that on Elisha, and apparently Elisha knew what that meant. It meant it's time to follow God. It's time to follow Elijah in his ministry. And so Elisha kind of talks to Elijah, and there in verses 20 and 21, I'm going to go talk to my parents, let them know that I'm leaving. And, is that okay with you? And Elijah's like, that's kind of between you and God. I mean, go take care of business, and then we're going to get to work. And so Elisha comes back in verse 21. He returns from following him, and he takes the pair of oxen, and he sacrifices them and boils their flesh with the implements of the oxen, and he gives it to the people, and they ate. And then he arose and followed Elijah and ministered to him. So, do you notice what happened there? He comes back and he takes it says the implements. I don't know what your translation might say, but that would be the yoke, okay, like the big chunk of wood that goes over the backs of the oxen. And he starts a campfire with it, and then he boils his oxen with that fire, right? And he feeds it to the people. Do you think Elisha has plans to go back to farming in a couple days? Not at all. He says, I'm done. I am that phase of my life is over. I'm following God's mission now, and farming is not going to be a fallback for me when it gets hard. So I just love that. It's kind of, he kills his oxen and stuff, but he wanted to make sure that he had no fallback for when it inevitably got tough. It's interesting. We kind of have like a semi-modern historical reference to this. Have you ever heard of Cortez landing in Veracruz? It was in the 1500s. He had the intention of conquering the Aztec nation. And as legend has it, once they landed on the beaches and they were going to go, good or not, we're not going to debate that, but he had the intention of conquering the Aztecs, and he ordered his men, he said, burn the ships. Now that's kind of unconventional, right? You would think a military commander wouldn't, destroy his own resources, but it was a mental thing. He said, if you want to go home, we have to win, right? We're going to use their boats to go home. We're not going to run back to our ships if, things get tough. We're going to, at all costs, win this battle. Succeed or die is basically how Cortez put it. God never gives us the option to fall back on a safety net. In fact, putting him first always is a pretty big theme in the scriptures, right? Matthew 6, verse 33, let's see if I can get it up there, says, but seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Jesus would also say in Matthew 10, verses 34 through 38, next slide, please. There it is. He says that our commitment to him will be difficult, and therefore we have to love him more than our fathers and our mothers, more than our sons and daughters. Whatever situation you're in, you can't have any sort of relationship or thing or possession that takes priority over your relationship with him. He says, he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy to be my disciple. He says if we commit ourselves to him, actually in that passage, if we give up our lives for his sake, we'll actually find our lives. It's actually, we think in terms of, if we follow Jesus and we live this life of where, we don't get all the benefits of the people in the world, it's easy for them to pursue money and happiness. Whatever they want, and we're stuck just following God. That can sound kind of curmudgeonly, kind of sound dark if you follow it that way. But Jesus says you'll actually live life more abundantly if you follow me and not those things. The idea of falling back on a safety net is really not safe at all. You think about marriage. Married couples, sorry, I'm looking over Josh's I'm just going to keep taking notes. Married couples who reserve divorce as a fallback and a safety net are statistically proven to be doomed to failure. If you don't burn the ship of divorce, if you come into that institution and say, if it gets hard, I've got this boat, this lifeboat that I'm ready to jump on when it gets tough, you will do it. If you do reserve that right to do that. So burn the ship of divorce. And that, that idea, it's obvious when applies to marriage, but that applies to anything else we do in this life, that if we reserve the ability to fall back onto something, then we will more often than not do that. Retreat is easy if you have the option. Cortez knew it. Jesus certainly knew it. God teaches us that. The question for us here in this section is leaving Christ, is leaving the church an option for us if things don't go as smoothly as we had hoped they would be going at this point in our lives. Secondly, though, if you decide that failure is not an option, we must remember that we will still face adversity. Next slide, please. There it is. 2 Timothy 3:12, Paul says, all who desire to live godly in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. People follow Jesus for a lot of reasons. One of the big reasons we see in the Gospels is curiosity. In those cases, when Jesus has huge crowds, Jesus knows who are in those crowds, right? He knows the demography, the demographic makeup of, he knows there are genuine people, he knows there's curious ones, he knows there's ones that are just in it for, hey, he can make bread out of nothing, like let's follow him for those reasons. And Jesus knows that. And so he turns around in John chapter 6 and he says, if you're not willing to, die to yourself daily, pick up your cross, follow me, this could be tough for you. And it's said that after he makes this statement that many of the multitudes stopped walking with him. I've heard it said, talking about, I try to avoid this topic because we hear about it so much, but as far as the coronavirus goes, there's this, sometimes I wonder, and I'm not saying this is always the case, or maybe we shouldn't think of it this way, but sometimes I wonder, with the coronavirus, did COVID actually reveal who truly is more dedicated to Christ than others? Not in the sense of can they come to church physically, presently, or not, but did it, if they were on the fringe, was all it took was a virus to make them abandon all faith, right? Abandon all hope, ye who enter here, sort of thing. So I've heard people talk about that and debate it, and sometimes I wonder, maybe a good virus once in a while will reveal where our faith truly is at. Because those people in John's gospel, Jesus knew them. He knew if trials come, these people aren't going to be with me. When there's hard teachings, right? If they can't handle what I just said there, what happens when I get to the topic of marriage, divorce, and remarriage? And we know the disciples struggled with that in Matthew 19. There's all sorts of things that he just knew. I'm just going to thin the crowds out right here. It's interesting that our Messiah would do that, but he does. He says those things because he knew men's hearts. So what Jesus needs and what will endure are people who will be committed, because hardship will come. And so if we're not totally committed, we will be overwhelmed, and we just might desert the Lord. Is that an option for us? Is that an option that you are reserving for yourself? Number two, not only will we still face adversity, God will know the difference in our hearts. He knows if we truly mean it or not. I think sometimes we try to play a game with God where, I don't know if we don't think he knows this about us, but if we just go through the motions and we do the visual outward things, the external things, do we think that we fool him if we're really not into this thing called Christianity? There's a church in Revelation, the church at Sardis in Revelation 3 verse 1. It says that they had a name that they were alive. Like, you have a great name in your community. It says you have the greatest reputation in your community. And the people of Sardis, Jesus through John says, the people of that city think that you guys are a great happening church, right? There's big things going on. You have a name that you are alive. And that's a happening church. They got good programs. They're doing this. They're doing that. But Jesus says, no, actually, you're dead. You have a name. You have a reputation of being alive in your community. But deep down, I know better. I know your hearts and why you are doing those externals that are causing people to believe that you are faithful to me when in fact you are not. So the people must have been doing some things to cause their community to go, well, that's a good church. You know that I don't know if it's the Sardinian church. Is it the Sardine church? I don't know, whatever. That church down on the corner in Sardis, boy, they've got it going on. But Jesus says, I'm walking among those lampstands. I know genuineness when I see it. There's another church, actually, same chapter, Revelation 3, verses 14 through 19. It's the church at Laodicea. They thought that they were rich and healthy and wealthy and probably wise. And God said, no, in reality, you're blind, you're poor, you're wretched. You don't even know your situation. But I know. You're lukewarm. You aren't totally committed to me. You're trying to walk the middle of the road, and I see it. You're right on that fence line, and even if other people can't catch on, I see it. So we have to be careful sometimes thinking to ourselves that the visible stuff will get us by. I'll go to church, I'll go to Bible class, I'll do some other things here and there, but you have to be totally committed to God. There's a king in 2 Chronicles that we read about. His name was Amaziah. He became king at the age of 25. He reigned about 29 years. And there's usually a phrase that indicates the goodness or the badness of the kings of Israel, right? And they're, as the writer of Kings is kind of recording this, when he sums up the nature of each king, there's usually a line that says, and such did evil or such and such did good in the sight of the Lord. And Amaziah, it's interesting, he's kind of a mixed bag. It says in 25 verse 2, he did right in the sight of the Lord, which is kind of rare in those days, but we wish that there was a period right there. He's kind of a mixed bag because it says he did right on the side of the Lord, comma, yet not with a loyal heart. He got it right a lot of the time. But if there was something that kind of caught his attention, if there was something else that seemed better for a time, he would actually go that way. He would eventually come back to me, but then he'd go that way. He had split commitments, split loyalties, and God saw it. And it's forever recorded for us to read about this king that, try as he may, he's still diverted. And God noticed. Solomon was no different. 1 Kings 11, verse 6. That's kind of one of Solomon's many summarizing verses. And there, we're told that even with all the great things that he did, Solomon had a blemish on his record that his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God. See, we can't pull one over on God. He sees the difference. You can do all the right things, but still not have a loyal, genuine heart. Number 3. If you decide that failure is not an option, next slide, please, then you have to remember, who you are serving. Because if I'm serving for you, if I coming here for the person to my left or my right, a little southern accent slipped in there, sorry. Abigail's like, no, that wasn't even southern at all. Then I might give up because you might upset me someday, right? That's part of life. Human beings grate on each other. They run over each other sometimes. We trample on each other sometimes, and we don't always mean to, but when we do get bent out of shape with each other, then I don't want to do nice things for you. Maybe you don't want to do nice things for me, and I want to have my pout once in a while, and it's almost like, if the other person apologizes too fast, it's like, no, I wanted to sulk a little bit longer, right? But, if we're here for other people, and I get that there is that horizontal relationship that we have with each other, we're here for God first, though, because I'll give you a good illustration of this. As I was on the phone with a person that I love the other day, that I've been trying to get this person to go to church for a long time, okay? And we're talking on the phone, and they say, I've been going, and I have to tell you, I have to be brutally honest, something happened, and I don't know if I want to go back. I said, oh no, what is it? What happened? And this person said, well, an elder got up I was there because I wanted to listen to the sermon, and that's great. But an elder got up and did announcements, and he made a statement about vaccination and how we all have to go do it, or this, that, and the other thing. And he took a stance that I don't agree with the vaccine. And I said, "Are you going to church for that elder, or are you going to church to be closer to God?" And I said, "Be very careful about throwing out," what's the phrase, "the baby with the bathwater." People will let you down in the church. And guess what? Elders, if we have elders, are not exempt from that. Deacons, preachers, oh Lord, preachers, we're not exempt from that. We're probably going to say something eventually from the pulpit that will rub you the wrong way. Hopefully, more often than not, we do that with good intentions to where you'll say, "You know what, I needed to hear that and change my life." But sometimes people take the other route of, "Wow, I'm never coming back because the preacher offended me," or whatever. And we lose sleep over that, and it bothers us sometimes. But we try to impress on people, you're not there for the preacher. You're not there for the elder. And in this case, that elder said something that this person didn't agree with, and it was like, well, was it a spiritual thing or was it a political thing too? I mean, you got all this dancing in your mind, and I just said, if your service is for God, then people cannot be the reason for you to not be committed. If you're there for God, first and foremost, then people cannot be the reason for you to not be committed. If you get mad at anybody else, you'll still serve God because you're there for Him. You'll still serve even if your spouse doesn't. You'll still serve even if your parents don't. There's no excuse not to serve if you're doing it for God. So it's not an option if you're doing it for God. And how could you ever say no since He has asked us to serve Him? So when it comes to our relationship with Christ, we don't just want to win, we have to win. So the question, the big one for us as we conclude this morning, next slide please. Have you burned your ships? All right? Do you have a ship in your harbor somewhere that is named my pet sin, or my escape plan if this doesn't work out, if that doesn't work out? Are you reserving the ability to walk away when things get tough? Well, Elisha, he burned his oxen because he said, farming is never going to take precedence over the mission that God has given me now. Cortez, right or wrong, burned his ships behind his men so that they had to win at all costs. Jesus is telling us we have to burn our ships if we're serious about Him. We cannot reserve the right to walk away, or the privilege maybe of walking away when things grate on us. Don't give yourself the option of quitting. It's not an option. So if you haven't burned those ships, if you've reserved something to get away on, ask yourself, why? Are you just not ready to give up that sin? Does it just seem to be always there for you and at the right time, and it's just easy? Why? Why haven't you burned that one? Are you scared? Maybe it's you have a difficult family dynamic with your faith, where maybe I'll just tell you, personal for me and others I know, maybe you're the only one in your family that really thinks the way that you think, and you're the most convicted one maybe, and it makes you stick out. And maybe it's the intimidation that you see in your family life. Whatever it might be, Jesus says, when you put your hand to the plow and you look back, if you do look back, I'll just submit this. Make sure that you're only looking back to say there's nothing left back there for me to go back to. Right? I've chosen Christ. I'm going that direction. I don't want anything to do with whatever lies behind. I belong to Jesus, and I'm all in. So that is the lesson this morning. Josh will have a song of encouragement for us at this time. If you are not fully committed, if you don't know how to be fully committed, if you need help to be fully committed, whatever it might be, let that be known. We'll chat today. How about that? That'll be the invitation. That'll be the challenge in response to the sermon. So why don't we stand and sing at this time? Josh.
Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, that calls me from a world of care, and bids me is known. In seasons of distress and grief, my soul has often found relief, and of escape the tempter's snare by thy return, sweet